just really searching right now. I mean, my favorite professor doesn't even believe in God. And my roommate is part of this totally different religion it's actually pretty interesting to me. And then there's my boyfriend who just kind of picks and chooses from different religions. You know, I always thought I knew what I believed about God. Now I'm just not sure.
Well, the good news is it doesn't really matter what you believe, as long as you're sincere.
I shouldn't even have to tell you this, but God never said that. I do believe that sincerely looked like it hurt. You got one on your hair. It's hilarious.
Welcome back to another week of life group discussion for God Never Said That.
Can you believe that we are in the fourth and final week?
You know, this week, we're actually talking about a really common misbelief about God and spirituality.
That's right. Where people say it doesn't matter what you believe as long as you're sincere.
You know, in fact, in the message, we looked at several of the most popular world religions, and we had to acknowledge this honestly. There might be some truth and beauty in all different kinds of religions.
But they are absolutely and completely not the same. They are so different.
That's so true. You know, what we'd like to do today is talk about 3 different questions.
The first question will be kind of an icebreaker question.
The second question will take us a little bit deeper.
And then the third question is always a question of application. What are we going to do with what God is showing us?
So, the first question that we'd like to focus on is to have you think about what influenced you spiritually as a child. So, what spiritual influences did you experience as a child?
For example, in our formative years, we grew up in traditional Adventist churches. And the reality is, I was never fully engaged or challenged spiritually. It was maybe not the fault of the church. It may have been, partly my fault for not necessarily paying attention, whatevs.
You know, Christianity and the church was more of a tradition than a relationship with God during those formative years. And, what I really remember was that tradition. I remember the standing up and the sitting down. I remember choirs singing up at the front and singing from the hymnal all the time. Things like that.
Not that there's anything wrong with that. It's just, it didn't go further than the tradition.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. What we'd like for you to do right now is to just go around the room and discuss. Some of you might have a long answer, or you may say, well, I really don't have hardly any spiritual influence. And that's a fine answer as well.
But talk about what were the influences that you experienced spiritually growing up in your home or in your family?
All right, let's deal with the second question. We're going to talk a little bit about the life and ministry of Jesus.
In fact, in the message, Pastor Dan said to consider Jesus.
That's right, not to consider Red Willow Community Church or to consider Christianity, because Jesus didn't really come to start a religion.
Exactly. He came to be a bridge between sinful man and a holy God.
So let's really consider Jesus, who he was, what he said, and what he did.
His claims, his life, his ministry,
his message, his resurrection. Just consider Jesus.
What I want you to do for a minute is just consider this question. What about the life and ministry of Jesus most impacts you personally?
For example, for me, since what I saw was a lot of tradition in my formative years, I had this almost fear that I just didn't measure up. And it was only when I started really reading the Bible in college that Jesus started to become very, very real to me.
It's like, man, this guy totally and completely accepted sinners, and he rejected the religious people. I never really understood that.
You know, and when I read about the grace of God, that we're saved by grace through faith, that it's not about our works, that meant so much to me.
Absolutely. I felt so much guilt because I knew I wasn't good enough. And somehow I sensed that I'd never be good enough. And when I just recognized that Jesus was good enough in my place, to me, the only reasonable response was to say, "You've got my whole life. I'm all in completely."
So it was the grace of Jesus, the friend of sinners, that meant so much.
I'd like for you to go around the room as you just consider Jesus and answer the question, what about the life and ministry of Jesus has most impacted you?
All right, before we dive into the very last question, and this will be the question of application, I want you to read Romans chapter 3, verses 21 to 26.
As you do, I want this to set the tone for your application question as you remember that all of us have sinned, that we're not made right with God by our own works, but we're justified by faith in Jesus alone.
That's right, faith in Jesus. Not Jesus plus good works or Jesus plus church membership or even Jesus minus sin. It's Jesus and Jesus alone that makes us right with God.
As that settles into your heart, the reality and ministry of Jesus becomes very, very real.
You know, the disciples, they were willing to give their lives in order to spread the good news of Jesus.
Now, I want you to think about the truth that you are called to be an ambassador. Mm-hmm. You are God's highest ranking diplomat sent from heaven to earth.
This earth is not your home. Heaven is your home. You're here to represent not yourself, but to always represent Christ.
You're his ambassador, showing the good news and the love of Jesus.
The third question that I want to ask, or that we want to ask really, is very simple. What is God calling you to do to show his love to people who don't know him?
It could be people in your family, people you work with, people you go to the gym with.
Or maybe people that you play sports with, or people you do hobbies with.
What is God calling you to do to show his love to people who do not know him?